Oh, hey, I'm just packing for my trip tomorrow. And you know, I was thinking about the Apocrypha. Now, the Apocrypha consists of 8 different books that appeared in the early Greek translations of the Hebrew Bible. But interestingly enough, not in the text of the Hebrew Bible itself. The reason for this is that the Jewish community decided not to include it in their Hebrew Bible. But for many Christians, they read it and treated it as a part of Scripture for over 1,000 years until the Roman Catholic Council of Trent in 1546. At this council, this is where they decided to officially include it into their canon. But for Protestants, however, they did not. Could you get that?
Oh yeah, I got you.
So the Roman Catholic Church calls these books deuterocanonical, which means that they don't assign as much authority to these books as they do other biblical books. However, the Protestants actually assign no authority to these books, and they can sometimes be found in study Bibles and things like that, but usually they're not found in the Protestant Bibles.
The first book that we'll cover is the Book of Tobit. The Book of Tobit is set in 7th century BCE and written sometime between 275 and 175 BCE. It covers the story of a family that is taken into exile into Assyria after the northern kingdom of Israel has fallen. And it answers this question of, why do good people suffer? Why do bad things happen to good people? The Book of Tobit answers this question of theodicy in a couple different ways in a couple different places. In one of the places it says that, you know what, bad things happen because you're being bad and it's a punishment, and so you need to reestablish that righteousness. In some places, it says that actually it's demonic forces that are at work. But then finally, in some places, it says, you know what, there's no good reason at all. It's just bad. Now, if you're an average Bible enjoyer, you might recognize that, you know what, the Book of Tobit and the Book of Job share a lot of similarities.
The next book is the Book of Judith, and it's about a beautiful and righteous woman who saved the nation of Judea from destruction. Okay, so the Book of Judith is about a woman named Judith, who's a widow woman. She actually seduces Nebuchadnezzar and then gets him drunk to the point of unconsciousness, and then cuts his head off with a sword, and then defeats his entire army through killing him. So then the city comes out victorious and defeats a huge army because of her.
The next book that we'll talk about is the Book of Esther. And now you might be saying, well, as a Protestant, I know Esther. What's the deal? And yes, you do know Esther, but the Greek version has some key differences. And those being 6 large additions to the Book of Esther. One of them is a dream. One of them is a decree to kill Jews. Another is a decree to save Jews. So 2 of them are decrees. Another 2 are prayers. One from Esther and one from Mordecai. And another one finally interprets the dream. And now you might be saying, with these additions, is the book different? And no, it's not different than the Hebrew version. But it just has a few key differences. The differences being that the Greek version, it makes a bigger distinction between Jews and non-Jews. And it also mentions the name of God many, many times when the Hebrew version does not. The main themes of the book are there, though. So the themes being how to live for Jews, how to live in a world where the world hates them, and knowing that God is with them even in the hardest of times. Now, the additions, they were completed in 75 BCE, and they were also originally in Latin. Now, the Latin version was numbered with all of the additions at the end, but in subsequent translations, the numbering was then transferred so that the stories were in chronological order, but the numbering stayed the same. So you went from Esther 1, 2, and 3, all the way to 15, back to 4.
Okay, so the next book is called The Wisdom of Solomon. This book encourages the use of wisdom, and it talks about the nature of wisdom and its historical value. So although it's called The Wisdom of Solomon, it's actually not written by Solomon. It's written by a Jewish author that lived in Egypt between 30 and 50 BCE.
The next book that we're going to talk about is the book of Sirach. Now, the full name of this book is The Wisdom of Jesus, the son of Sirach. Now, in this book, it instructs Jews to live for God and to live in wisdom. It also tells them to live in awe of the glory and power of God. One of the things that this book says is that wisdom is seen in the law, and that the law reveals the will of God. And so, the pursuit of wisdom and the pursuit of living in the fear of God are related.
Okay, so the sixth book is the book of Baruch, and this book was written by the secretary of the prophet of Jeremiah during one of the exiles in Babylonia. This book encourages not to worship other gods because they have no real power. Okay, so the first part of the book is an intro to Baruch, who was a writer of poems and prayers. The second part is about how the exile was a result of the people rejecting God's law and worshiping other gods. And finally, the third part is a poem about wisdom.
Hey! The next thing that we're going to talk about are the three large additions to Daniel. The first is the prayer of Azariah and the Song of the Three Jews. In it, it's an addition to the story of Shadrach, Meshach, and Abednego. And in it, it has a praise, a song. The next is Susanna, and it's a story about a woman who was framed and she was about to be killed, but Daniel uses his smarts to outwit his opponent, and they're killed instead. Then, Bel and the Dragon, it's a story that tells against worship of idols. And Daniel, well, you see, he destroys an idol, and he's thrown into a den of lions. And actually, instead, his oppressors are thrown into the den of lions, and they're killed.
Okay, so first Maccabees talks about the Maccabean revolt against the Seleucid Empire. So this book details the Jewish practices that were forbade by the king Antiochus. It also talks about the successes and the setbacks of the revolt, and it also talks about the formation of the rebellion by the Hasmonean family. So the book is best known for the recapturing of Jerusalem and the rededication of the Second Temple.
The next book that we'll talk about is the book of 2 Maccabees, and its purpose is to encourage Jews outside of Palestine to celebrate Hanukkah. It provides an account of the Maccabean revolt, yet only about the story of Judas. The author celebrates the religious goals of Judas in the Maccabean revolt, but not the political aims of his successors. The author also believes that when the people are faithful, God protects them, but when they're unfaithful, God gives them over to their enemies. The book also has a kind of martyr theology, that where the faithful martyrs die for the sins of the people, but these martyrs are given a blessed afterlife. Well, it's been a pretty wild ride, but those are all of the books of the Apocrypha. And while they aren't considered scripture by Protestants, there's still a lot of good in them. And so I think everybody should at least take a look.